You've always been too sensitive, Emma. This is why nobody takes you seriously. My mother's words landed like a slap as I stood in her kitchen in Millbrook, Pennsylvania, surrounded by the chaos of another Thompson family gathering. The familiar scent of her signature pot roast filled the air, mingling with the faint trace of lemon furniture polish she insisted on using, despite everyone telling her it smelled too strong. Aunt Linda nodded in agreement, her freshly highlighted hair bouncing slightly with the movement, chunky turquoise jewelry clinking against the granite countertop. Uncle Dan pretended to be absorbed in the football game, blaring from the TV in the next room, occasionally shouting something about a missed call, while carefully avoiding the tension in the kitchen. My younger brother Matt avoided eye contact entirely, suddenly fascinated by the pattern on his beer bottle label, picking at it with his thumbnail the way he'd done since high school whenever things got uncomfortable. I had just suggested, that maybe selling Grandma's house without consulting everyone wasn't the right move. Grandma had been gone only 3 months, and already they were carving up her estate like vultures. The house where we'd all spent our summers, where I'd learned to bake pies and catch fireflies, was being auctioned off to pay for my cousin Trent's business venture. Trent, who hadn't visited Grandma once during her final years. Trent, whose Christmas cards always arrived late, if at all. Trent, who'd somehow convinced everyone that his latest entrepreneurial scheme, some kind of tech startup involving cryptocurrency and social media that he couldn't explain in layman's terms, was their ticket to family prosperity. The 2-story colonial with its wraparound porch and creaky swing, the place where Grandma had lived for 43 years after Grandpa died, deserved better than to be liquidated for Trent's PowerPoint dreams. I could still see her tending to her prized heirloom tomatoes in the backyard, wearing that ridiculous wide-brimmed hat and humming Patsy Cline songs under her breath. The house still held her essence in every corner, from the hand-painted tiles around the kitchen sink to the notches on the wall measuring grandchildren's growth over decades. "I'm not being sensitive," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm saying we should all have a say. That house means something to all of us." Mom exchanged glances with Dad, that familiar look that said, "Here she goes again." My father cleared his throat, assuming his role as the family diplomat. "Emma, honey, we've discussed this. Trent has a real opportunity here, and the timing is crucial. The market won't wait." "We?" I asked. "Who's we?" Because I wasn't part of any discussion. Aunt Linda sighed dramatically. "Emma, your cousin has an MBA. He understands business in ways you don't. Sometimes you need to trust that others know what's best." There it was again. The dismissal. The reminder that my voice carried less weight than others in this family. I was just Emma, the elementary school teacher who played with children all day. Never mind that I'd been the one driving Grandma to her doctor's appointments for the past 5 years. Never mind that I'd been the one managing her medications, coordinating with her care team, spending nights at her house when she was too afraid to be alone. I looked around the room at their faces, so certain, so comfortable in their authority. This wasn't new. It had been this way since I was a child, standing on a step stool helping Mom bake cookies while offering my thoughts on which frosting would be best, only to be patted on the head and told, "The adults will decide." But I wasn't a child anymore. I was 34 years old. "You know what?" I said, setting down my wine glass with enough force that the red liquid sloshed dangerously close to the rim. "Do whatever you want. You will anyway." I grabbed my purse and jacket, ignoring my mother's exasperated call of my name as I walked out the door. Behind me, I heard Aunt Linda's voice. "Drama queen. Always has been." 3 days later, I was still seething when my phone rang. It was Matt. "Hey, Em," he said, his voice tense. "So, they signed the papers yesterday. Grandma's house is sold." I gripped the phone tighter but said nothing. "Look, I know you're upset," he continued, filling my silence. "But Trent really does know what he's doing. And the family needed that money." "The family?" I repeated. "Or Trent?" Matt sighed. "Can you not make this difficult? Mom's already stressed that you walked out on Sunday." "Of course she is," I said, pacing my small apartment. "Heaven forbid someone disrupts the Thompson family harmony by having an opinion." "That's not fair, Emma." "No? When was the last time anyone in this family actually listened to me, Matt? When was the last time my thoughts mattered as much as Trent's business plans, or Dad's financial wisdom, or your engineering expertise? There was a long pause. We listen to you. No, you hear me. There's a difference. After we hung up, I sat at my kitchen table staring at the stack of Grandma's old recipes I'd rescued from her house before anyone could throw them away. She'd always listen to me. Emma has good instincts, she used to say when I'd suggest adding more cinnamon to the apple pie, or when I'd voiced concerns about a family member's behavior. I thought about all the times I'd fought to be heard in this family, all the times I'd defended others, mediated conflicts, shown up when someone needed help moving, or needed a shoulder to cry on. I was good enough to be their emotional support, their free babysitter, their designated driver, but never good enough to have an equal vote. Something shifted inside me that night, a quiet resolution forming. I was done fighting for a place at a table where I'd never be welcome as anything more than a servant. Over the next few months, I started creating distance. I declined Sunday dinners, citing work commitments. I let calls go to voicemail. I kept my responses to family group texts brief and non-committal. The first few times I said no, my stomach twisted with guilt. My fingers would hover over the phone, ready to call back and say I'd rearrange my schedule. But I held firm. February's traditional Valentine's Day family brunch, a tradition Mom had started when we were kids, came and went without me. So did the St. Patrick's Day dinner, where Uncle Dan always made his 2 strong Irish coffees. Each declined invitation felt like removing a brick from the wall of obligation I'd built around myself. Each "I can't make it" text message was both terrifying and liberating. I'd spent 34 years being the reliable one, the dependable Emma who would drop everything to drive Aunt Linda to her doctor's appointment, or help Cousin Jenna move apartments, or babysit Matt's kids on date night. My absence created ripples I could feel even from a distance. Instead, I focused on building my own life. I joined a book club that met every Wednesday at Percolate, a coffee shop downtown with mismatched furniture and local art on the walls. There, I met Diane, a divorced attorney who laughed loudly and unapologetically, and Rebecca, a nurse with tattoo sleeves who recommended books that changed how I saw the world. They didn't know me as someone's daughter or sister or cousin. They just knew me as Emma. I took a pottery class at the community center, making lopsided mugs and bowls that somehow became more precious to me than the matching dishware sets my mother had given me over the years. My instructor, a 70-year-old man named Jim, with clay permanently embedded in the lines of his hands, told me I had honest fingers, whatever that meant. But when I wrapped my hands around the cool, wet clay and felt it respond to my touch, I understood something about creation that I never had before. There was power in making something, however imperfect, that was entirely your own. I made friends with a couple in my apartment building, Zoe and Marcus, who invited me over for dinner parties where everyone's voice was given equal weight in conversations. Their apartment was a testament to their complementary tastes. Marcus's vintage record collection alongside Zoe's modern art pieces, neither dominating the space. The first time I joined them for dinner, I instinctively offered to help serve and clean up, falling into my familiar role. But Marcus just handed me a glass of wine and said, "Relax, you're a guest tonight." It was a small moment, but it nearly brought me to tears. It was during this time that I also started seeing a therapist, Dr. Mira Shah, who helped me understand the dynamics that had shaped my family relationships. I'd resisted therapy for years, partly because of the stigma my family attached to it. Therapy is for people who don't have family to talk to, my father always said, and partly because I was afraid of what I might discover about myself. What you're describing sounds like a classic family system where roles are rigidly defined, she explained during one session. You've been cast as the caretaker and peacekeeper, but not the decision maker or authority. So what do? I asked. You're already doing it, she said. You're setting boundaries. You're finding your voice in other relationships, and you're allowing yourself to step back from a role that's no longer serving you. Dr. Shah's office became a sanctuary of sorts. The soft gray walls, the unobtrusive artwork, the small fountain bubbling quietly in the corner, it was a space designed for truth-telling. In that room, with Dr. Shaw's patient guidance, I began to unpack what it meant to be the family fixer, the emotional support beam everyone leaned on, but no one reinforced. Think of it like emotional labor, she explained in one session, her dark eyes thoughtful behind stylish glasses. In families, this labor is often distributed unevenly, with some members carrying a disproportionate share. And like any labor, if it's not acknowledged or valued, it leads to burnout. That's exactly how I feel, I said. Burned out, used up. And yet, there's often tremendous guilt associated with stepping back from these roles, she continued. The very people who have benefited from your emotional labor will be the ones most resistant to you changing the dynamic. It wasn't easy. There were moments of doubt, nights when loneliness crept in and whispered that maybe I was being too harsh, too selfish. But those voices grew fainter as I grew stronger in my resolve. By Thanksgiving, my absence was notable enough that my mother's texts had evolved from casual check-ins to pointed inquiries. Where are you spending the holiday? Everyone's asking about you. The message came with a photo attached. Last year's Thanksgiving table, everyone's smiling with plates piled high. I was in the corner of the frame, half standing as I reached to refill someone's water glass. It was so typical that I almost laughed. Even in a photo meant to entice me back, I was caught in the act of serving others. I replied that I'd be having dinner with friends. The plans had come together naturally. Diane from book club mentioned that she wasn't flying home to Chicago this year. Rebecca offered her place since she had an obscenely large dining table for someone who usually eats standing over the sink. Zoe and Marcus were joining too, along with a few others I'd met through my expanding social circle. When I offered to bring my grandmother's famous cranberry orange relish, no one questioned whether I was qualified to make it. My mother's response was swift. Family should be with family on Thanksgiving. I stared at those words for a long time. Family should be with family. It sounded like a universal truth, a law of nature as undeniable as gravity. But I was beginning to understand that family wasn't just about blood and shared history. It was about mutual respect, about being seen and heard. By that definition, I wasn't sure the Thompsons qualified anymore. 3 hours later, my phone rang. It was Dad. Emma, he said, his voice carrying that familiar note of patient explanation. Your mother is very upset. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, surprised by how calm I felt. You know how important family gatherings are to her, especially Thanksgiving. I do know that. Then why aren't you coming? I took a deep breath. Because I need some space right now, Dad. Space from what? From your family who loves you? The question hung in the air, a perfect opportunity to fall back into old patterns. To apologize, to acquiesce, to put their comfort above my own. But I didn't take it. I need space from feeling like I don't matter, I said finally, from having my opinions dismissed, from being good enough to help but not good enough to be heard. There was a long silence. Then, that's not fair, Emma. We've always supported you. In the ways you wanted to, yes. Not in the ways I needed. After we hung up, I felt a strange mix of grief and liberation. The grief was familiar. I'd been carrying it for years. The liberation was new, a lightness I was just beginning to recognize. By Christmas, the texts and calls had increased dramatically. My mother sent photos of family gatherings, pointed reminders of what I was missing. My aunts reached out with concern that felt more like accusation. We're worried about you, Emma. This isn't like you. The holiday season amplified everything. Their demands, my resolve, the emotional undertow pulling in both directions. The Christmas cards started arriving in early December, each one a paper missile aimed at my defenses. Aunt Linda's annual letter detailed family accomplishments with pointed mentions of those we've missed this year. Mom sent a package containing my childhood ornaments with a note. I thought you should have these, since you seem to be creating your own traditions now. The passive-aggressive sting was offset by the unexpected joy I felt hanging those glitter-covered pine cones and popsicle stick reindeer on my own small tree. But it was like me, the me I was becoming. The me who had decided that love shouldn't require constant sacrifice. The me who had started to recognize how often family obligation was used as leverage to maintain an imbalanced system. The me who was learning that setting boundaries wasn't selfish, it was necessary for survival. After declining the Christmas invitation, I received a call from Trent. This was unexpected. My cousin and I had never been close. "Hey, Emma," he said with the forced casualness of someone who had been assigned a task. "Haven't seen you around lately?" "I've been busy." Right. So listen about Grandma's house." I waited. "The business opportunity didn't exactly pan out," he admitted. "There were some complications with the investors and, well, the money's basically gone." I closed my eyes, feeling a surge of anger but not surprise. "Why are you telling me this, Trent? I just thought you should know. And, Mom mentioned you might be able to help with some of the fallout. Given that you were so attached to the house and all." Of course. They didn't want my opinion. They wanted my help cleaning up their mess. "I'm not in a position to help," I said. "Come on, Emma. You've always been the one who steps up when things go wrong. The family needs you." The family needed me to be heard when I said selling the house was a mistake. The family needed to value my input as much as they valued yours. But they didn't, and now they need to handle the consequences without me. After hanging up, I blocked his number. Then, after a moment's hesitation, I blocked several other family members as well. Not everyone, not Matt, not my parents, but enough to create a buffer against the flood of guilt and manipulation I knew was coming. That night, I pulled out an old photo album and looked at pictures of family gatherings from years past. There I was, always slightly to the side, always the one taking care of something or someone. Always present, but never quite centered. I touched a photo of Grandma and me in her garden, both of us laughing as we held up misshapen tomatoes. "The odd ones have the best flavor," she'd told me that day. "Just like the odd people have the best hearts." I wondered what she would think of me now, stepping away from the family she had tried so hard to hold together. But then I remembered one of the last conversations we'd had, as she lay in her hospital bed, her hand frailly gripping mine. "Don't let them wear you down, Emma," she'd said. "You've got more strength than all of them combined." But strength isn't just about carrying others. It's about knowing when to set the burden down. The new year arrived, and with it came a barrage of messages from family members. They ranged from concerned to accusatory. "Nobody knows what's gotten into you, Emma. This isn't how family treats family. Your mother is beside herself. Is this how you repay her after everything she's done for you? The family is falling apart, and it started when you walked away. You were the one who always fought for us to stay together." That last one from my brother stung the most, because it contained a grain of truth. I had been the one who fought. I had been the one who organized reunions, who sent birthday cards, who remembered anniversaries, and made peace when tempers flared. But I was tired of fighting for people who wouldn't fight for me. I didn't respond to most of the messages, but I did call Matt. "The family isn't falling apart because I left," I told him. "It's falling apart because the foundation was weak to begin with, because some voices mattered more than others, because decisions were made based on hierarchy, not harmony." "That's not true," he protested, but his voice lacked conviction. "Isn't it? Tell me honestly, Matt, if Trent had objected to selling Grandma's house instead of me, would it have been sold?" His silence was answer enough. Spring came, bringing with it a new chapter in my life. I'd accepted a position as curriculum director at a school in Harrisburg, about 40 miles from Millbrook. The distance wasn't huge, but it was enough. Far enough to require planning for visits, close enough to make those visits possible if I wanted them. The job itself was a step up, a recognition of my skills, that my family had never quite acknowledged. "Curriculum director sounds fancy," my father had said when I told him, his tone suggesting it wasn't really. I found a small house with a garden that reminded me of Grandma's, complete with an apple tree that would bear fruit in the fall. The previous owners had painted the front door a cheerful yellow. "A bit bright," the real estate agent had commented, suggesting I might want to repaint it something more neutral. But I loved it immediately. This sunshine welcome to a home that was entirely mine. The house needed work. Some outdated fixtures, floors that creaked in protestation of footsteps, wallpaper in the bathroom that featured tiny pink flamingos that should have been relegated to the 1980s. But there was something perfect about its imperfections, something honest about the way it didn't try to hide its age or flaws. I spent weekends painting walls colors my mother would find scandalous, deep teal in the bedroom, burnt orange in the kitchen, and evenings planning my garden. I ordered seeds, heirloom tomatoes like Grandma grew, zinnias for color, basil and rosemary for my kitchen windowsill. I bought secondhand furniture that didn't match but felt right. When my book club friends came over for the first time, Diane declared it perfectly Emma, and I realized that for the first time in my life, I knew exactly what that meant. The day I moved in, Matt showed up unexpectedly with his truck. "Thought you could use some help," he said, standing awkwardly on my new porch. I let him in, and we worked in relative silence, unloading boxes and assembling furniture. It wasn't until we were taking a break, drinking lemonade on the back patio, that he spoke about what had been happening in my absence. "It's been a mess," he admitted. Trent's business failed completely, and now he's blaming Dad for not giving him better advice. Aunt Linda and Mom aren't speaking because Mom said Linda should have raised her son better. Uncle Dan is trying to stay neutral, which is just making everyone mad at him. I sipped my lemonade, letting the tartness wash over my tongue. "That sounds difficult." "It is." He looked at me, his eyes searching. "They need you, Emma. You were always the one who fixed things." I set my glass down. "That's the problem, Matt. I was expected to fix everything, but never allowed to prevent anything. My warnings were dismissed until it was time for me to clean up the wreckage." He lowered his gaze. "I get that now. I should have stood up for you more. It wasn't your responsibility to make them hear me, it was theirs to listen." We sat in silence for a while, the spring breeze rustling through the new leaves of my apple tree. "So you're not coming back?" he finally asked. "I didn't say that," I replied. "But if I do, it will be on different terms. I won't be the family bandage anymore, covering wounds, but never addressing what caused them." A month later, my mother showed up at my door unannounced. She looked older somehow, the lines around her mouth deeper than I remembered. "Nice place," she said, her eyes darting around as I let her in. "Small, though." "It's perfect for me," I replied, leading her to the living room where the afternoon sun cast warm rectangles on the hardwood floor. She sat stiffly on the edge of the sofa, her purse clutched on her lap like a shield. "Your father wanted to come, but he had a meeting he couldn't reschedule." I nodded, unsurprised. Dad had always found reasons to avoid difficult conversations. "Emma," she began, then stopped, seeming unsure how to continue. This was new. My mother was never at a loss for words. "I don't understand what's happened, why you've pulled away from us." I could have listed a decade of slights, a lifetime of being sidelined. But what would be the point? She either knew and couldn't admit it, or didn't know and wouldn't see it now. "I needed to find my own voice," I said simply, "away from a family where some voices carry more weight than others." She bristled. "That's not true. Everyone in our family is valued." "Mom, when was the last time my opinion changed a family decision? When was the last time I said something that wasn't immediately dismissed as me being too sensitive or dramatic?" She opened her mouth, then closed it again. "Exactly," I said. "I was good enough to be the family peacekeeper, the one who showed up when someone needed help. But I wasn't good enough to be heard when it mattered." "That's not fair," she said, but her protest sounded hollow. "It's not about fairness," I replied. "It's about recognition, about respect." We talked for nearly 2 hours, circling the same points, retreating to familiar defenses. But something was different this time. She was here in my space, where the power dynamic had shifted ever so slightly. As she was leaving, she paused at the door. "We're having a family meeting next Sunday about how to move forward after the financial situation." She couldn't quite bring herself to say, "after Trent lost all the money from Grandma's house." "Are you inviting me?" I asked. "Of course," she said, as if it were obvious. "Your family." I looked at her steadily. "And will my opinion matter this time?" She hesitated just a beat too long. "Everyone's opinion matters, Emma." "That's not what I asked," she sighed, her shoulders slumping slightly. "I hear you. I do. And yes, your opinion matters." I nodded, not committing either way. "I'll think about it." I did think about it. I thought about it as I planted tomatoes in my garden, as I graded end-of-year projects, as I had dinner with my new friends who listened when I spoke and valued what I had to say. In the end, I decided to go. Not because I believed everything had changed, but because I had changed. I wasn't seeking their approval anymore. I was secure in my own worth. The meeting was held at my parents' house, around the same dining table where countless family decisions had been made without my input. But this time, when I walked in, something was different. There was an empty chair at the center of the table, not off to the side where I usually sat. "Emma," my father said, standing to greet me, "we saved you a seat." The discussion was tense, as expected. Trent was defensive, my aunts and uncles divided in their blame, money had been lost, relationships strained. The family was indeed fracturing, but not because I had left, because the foundation had always been cracked. When it was my turn to speak, I didn't raise my voice or make dramatic declarations. I simply spoke my truth. "What happened with Grandma's house was predictable," I said. "Not because Trent is incompetent, but because the decision was made in haste, without considering all perspectives." That's been our pattern for as long as I can remember. Some voices carry weight, others don't. And until that changes, we'll keep ending up here. There was silence when I finished. Not the dismissive silence I was used to, but a thoughtful one. "You tried to warn us," Aunt Linda admitted finally, "about the house. We should have listened." It wasn't a grand epiphany. The heavens didn't open up. But it was an acknowledgement, a small crack in the armor of family hierarchy that had defined us for so long. After the meeting, my mother pulled me aside. "Will you come for dinner next Sunday?" she asked, her voice holding an unfamiliar note of uncertainty. "I can't," I said. "I have plans with friends." She nodded, visibly disappointed but not pushing. "Another time, then?" "Another time," I agreed. As I drove home to my little house with its growing garden, I realized something. I hadn't won some great victory over my family. They hadn't suddenly transformed into people who would always value my voice. Change, especially in family dynamics, doesn't happen that way. But I had won something more important, the understanding that my worth wasn't determined by their recognition of it. I had built a life where my voice mattered, where I was heard without having to shout. That evening, I sat on my back patio with a glass of wine, watching the sunset paint the sky in streaks of orange and pink. My phone buzzed with a text from Matt. "You made an impact today. Things are going to be different." I smiled but didn't respond right away. Maybe things would be different, maybe not, but I would be different either way. I took a sip of my wine, savoring its complexity on my tongue. The sweet notes, the bitter undertones, the perfect balance that comes from allowing each element its proper place, just like a family should be, I thought. A harmony of voices, each one distinct, each one valued. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a group text from my mother to the entire family. "Emma has invited us all to her new home for a barbecue next month. Let's all make an effort to be there." I hadn't extended any such invitation, but rather than feeling angry, I found myself laughing. Some things hadn't changed at all. I typed out a response. "Mom, I haven't invited anyone over yet. When I do, I'll let you know." Then I set my phone aside and turned my face to the last rays of the setting sun. The bridge to my family wasn't broken beyond repair. It was just being rebuilt, plank by plank, on a stronger foundation. And this time, I wasn't doing all the work alone. I'd stopped fighting for a place at their table and built my own instead. And maybe, just maybe, that's what would save us all in the end.